It's a good evening in Rongai, and it is my sincere hope that each and every one of us is good. So, good evening once again. My name is Atina Brian, and I'm an activist, lawyer, and I'm passionate about my continent, Africa. So, as we move forward, that's the basic thing about me that I'd like you to know. So, first off, straight is first to express my sincere gratitude to each and every one of you who has made it the decision to join me this evening on this podcast. I know it isn't easy, it takes sacrifice, it takes dedication to dedicate 2 or 3 hours of your time to come and listen to this. So I'm grateful for everyone, and I'm reminded of the privilege that I have to be a youth, the privilege that I have to live in a country that is liberated, and the privilege that I'm free, I'm not in jail. And as far as I'm free, as you are free, we should make efforts to try the best way we can to make our country better. So I'm grateful to each and every one of you. Big up yourselves. Now, comrades, fellow youth, vijana, barobaro, and everyone else in this country, fellow countrymen, I want to say I'm grateful that you have taken your time to join me here today. And today, we are going to talk from the issue of opening up our markets, opening up our economy for investment from our neighboring nations, for investment from the international community, so that that way we can be able to alleviate poverty and be able to raise the poorest of the nation from that state. When it comes to markets, we as a nation, as a people, and in fact as a world, we haven't explored the full potential that comes from us opening up our markets for foreign investment. Now, while that's true that we have not taken efforts to that effect, the aim of this podcast, the aim of this communication, the aim of this speech today is try and shed light of the best ways we can open our economies and the benefits of that. Now, it goes without saying that just opening up our markets, opening up our borders may not be sufficient to help alleviate poverty, to help raise as many people from poverty as it should be. But that approach, as much as is the basis of us trying to alleviate poverty in this continent, in this nation, in this world, it has to be multi-pronged. It has to involve a lot of sectors, a lot of governments, a lot of individuals, even each and every one of us who can produce something for a market has a share in trying to get something out of the open borders that we envision to have. Now, with that said, we need to lower the costs of doing business, and especially business that is cross-border trade. We need to lower the cost of implements for farmers, which are got from the foreign areas. So this way we'll be able to make production for food affordable. And in the end, we can be able to elevate our people from hunger and our farmers from poverty. Throughout history, after the end of colonization, African nations have made efforts to try and do business with each other. While the legacy of borders, the legacy of these borders that we have is a colonial legacy, is a child of the colonial legacy. African nations have made efforts towards opening up the markets to trade with each other in the goods that are available. But with that said, the approach that our governments have been taking in as far as achieving trade equality with other foreign nations, especially in the global west, global north, has not been fair. So today we're going to look at those aspects and see in what is the best way that we as a nation, as a people, can be able to improve on that. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, as governments, as nations, we need to have a serious and deliberate look at the policies that we have in place. Trade policies with each other. And most especially trade policies with the global west. It is no secret that we do import second-hand clothing from them, which is, to say the truth, of better quality than at what we could manufacture by ourselves in this country. But with that said, what is the cost, the opportunity cost of having to forfeit our quests to build our own industries, to build our own tailors, to give labor to our tailors, to our cosmetic and clothing industry at the expense of importing this? So in as far as governments of African kind are concerned, we need to look towards opening conversation so that this kind of trade that we can have, especially related to textile, can be improved. Now, talking from the perspective of the Kenyans, as a Kenyan myself, we had made the right step by the advent of the devolved governments. That was a step towards opening up the rural areas for development. And that's great. It's a great step. But moving forward, the rural areas, and especially the marginalized counties, will form the basic unit at which government, and they need government anywhere, can be able to form basis for improvement of the small traders in those counties specifically. So as much as we have those counties, we need to develop laws that will best cater for the interest of that mama mboga, of that smoky seller, of those kind of small business that we have. And going forward, we as a country, as a people, we need to look at the risks that are faced by small traders. What kind of risk do they face that causes them so much losses? And this is with looking at these issues from the perspective of the post-COVID period. We need economic recovery, especially after this period that our economy have been working in less capacity. We need to look at the risk that this kind of traders have. Is it that the loans that have been due to them, especially after in the COVID period, are overdue? How can they be repaid back? How can the government reimburse those funds so that they can be able to continue business and maybe get to repay later? That's one aspect that we as government, we as nations in Africa have to look at. Those small traders, because all small traders make up 70% of all trade that happens. And in this day and age, it's no longer about agriculture, it's about service that are happening. So we have to look at those services that service providers, small scale traders, SMEs, to see on the best way we can be able to improve the situation. The risk that they face. What is the risk that they face? And that leads me to my next point. As government, we need to improve data collection. Data collection for small traders. Who are they? What do they do? What is their capital? What losses are they making? We need serious, deliberate records of those traders and what they do in the economy. Because that way we can be able to create models that will best serve the interest of that particular proportion of economic players that is so essential in improving this economy going forward. And it goes without saying that majority of those are youth. It's no secret to say that the backbone of the family's wealth creation, the capital wealth creation, lies on majorly two things. Number one is the human resource capital that the family might have. And number two is the land capital. So as much as the government is seeking to improve the human resource capital by improving the education system through the competence-based curriculum, CBC, we look as much as possible on the best way we can be able to use some of our land that is arid. So as government, we have to calculate into our models of development on ways to improve land use, ways to improve human resources, especially those of us who are involved in trade. How can we be able to help them? Because, for example, let's talk about a tailor. A tailor has a skill. They can make clothes. They can make tents. They can make bags. But what happens when you, as government, allow second-hand clothing from foreign nations? You allow clothes to come from foreign nations, and then the same government is investing in polytechnics for people to learn tailoring. Who will they tailor those clothes for? And I don't mean to say that we do that immediately, like we need to at least begin the right steps towards that. The right steps towards creating the demand for the goods that these people that we train will create. Because that way, we'll be able to give them employment and decent living. Otherwise, they'll always end up in the streets, despite the skills that they have. Core to our economies at this moment in time is innovation. It is true innovation that America is the country it is. Facebook, Apple, talk about Twitter, talk about every other application that you have on your phone right now. Those are innovation by people. As a country, we are privileged. Yes, we have made significant steps in innovation. We have M-Pesa. We have digital lending platforms right now. We have that kind of thing that going on. But going forward, every industry that we have in this country, be it in the matatu industry, be it in the transport industry, be it in the agriculture, we need to seek ways and create departments in those industries, in the ministries, to make sure that innovation is ushered, innovation is appreciated, innovation is accepted as the mode that we as a nation, as a country, going forward can be able to improve the lives of our people. Another thing is the cost reduction of what the poor people spend. Now, who are the poor? Let me break it down to you. A poor person in this country at this day and age most likely has a degree. A poor person in this country in this day and age most likely can speak in English. A poor person in this country can do basic math, arithmetic. And with that said, as a nation, we have to look into what this kind of people do. What kind of business are they engaging? What skills do they sell? Are they people in construction industry, mjengo? They selling the energy. How best can we be able to make sure that they earn enough to support themselves for their families and their future? And mind you, these people are being underpaid. People in industries in some industry in this country are being underpaid. There's no way you can employ a graduate to work for you in a construction firm and you pay them 500 bob a day. That's unfair. And with that said, we as a nation, as labor unions that they exist, need to just stand up for this kind of people who need our help. So we need to reduce the costs that these poor people spend on and increase their earnings, because that way is the only way that we can be able to improve their livelihood, because that way is the only way they can be able to raise their families well, because that way is the only way that they can be able to educate the children to have a better future in the days to come. And it goes without saying that the trade reforms that we have had this far as a nation have not benefited the poorest of the poor. Talk about tax reprieves. None of that has been able to help the situation of the people who really need that. So going forward, we need to conduct trade reforms that really effect change on the markets that the poor people of this country work in. So those strategies, those models that government makes, politicians make, should be deliberately tailored for the markets that the poor people work in, for the services that they sell, because that way we'll be able to improve their living conditions. They'll be able to make more profits from their business. They'll be able to make enough for themselves, and they'll be able to make enough to even pay the tax and do everything that is required of them as a people in this country. Now, my next point, as government, as a nation, we need to make ways to best respond to risks that those people who make less than it should be, below the poverty line, should. We need to mitigate for their risks, ensure them for those small-scale traders, those who sell smokies in the streets, those who work in the construction industry, in Mjengo, those who work in those industries that so far they work so hard to earn so little. We need to ensure their risks, their health, which is at risk now. And it goes without saying that when we open up our markets, when we open up our industries, when we open up our markets, be it in the county level, be it in the national level, in the regional level, in COMESA, in the East African community, there are effects to that. And one of the effects has been that when you open up your markets and allow free trade to happen, that way, the competition to build goods of higher quality goes up. So does the demand. And when demand goes up and that kind of thing, business that is involved in production, producers are able to innovate more, to create more genuine goods, to create more quality goods, to create goods in higher quantity, because now they're selling to a higher population. And that way, they increase their factory capacity, leading to more people getting employed, more people involved in the sale of those goods that come in from the industries. And that way, we can be able to improve on the employment levels of this in this country. And when we open up our industries, when we open up our markets, when we open up our borders, our industries there'll be higher demand for those goods that come from those industries after a long time of sustained growth of industry. And when that is done, the higher prices and competition, most likely in the export markets, will make the industries grow. They'll be more genuine in what they do. And that way we can be able to increase our employment levels and be able to sustain the growth that we require as we head towards Vision 2030. When we open up our markets, when we open our borders, we increase the earning capacity of the lowest income earners in a day. Because now they can be able to move around more easily to find jobs. If it's not paying in Kenya, you can leave and go and work in Uganda. You can go work in South Africa, and you go work in Zambia, according to the skill that you have, because the God, our Creator, has given us an abundance of gifts of nature and talents. If your singing talent cannot pay in Kenya, perhaps can pay in South Africa. You can speak English. If your tailoring talent cannot make you earn in Kenya, it can work in Egypt. Because that way, when we open up our borders, we accommodate more of us. We accommodate our gifts. We accommodate our different talents. And throughout history, and especially recent history, it goes without saying that the trade policies that we have had have been imperfect, because they have been partially isolating some households. Some poor households have not been benefiting from trade that is conducted in a country. Going forward, we should have tariffs, changes that do not isolate those particular households. Because when you isolate a specific demography of your population from benefiting from trade, then you are denying a kid to go to school. You're denying a kid food. You're denying a mother some time to rest. They have to work in 4 jobs to sustain a living, which is not right in itself. So the market policies that we are going to usher ourselves as the East African community, as the African Union, as COMESA, as IGAD, ECOWAS, all of those need to specifically cater for the households that deserve those kind of incentives and tariffs. What goods do they produce that can be marketed outside those countries? And the policies drafted that way will be best able to accommodate them. When a trade is opened in between countries, when trade is allowed to flourish between countries, countries are more able to caution themselves in fluctuations that can come from environmental disasters, fluctuations that can come from disasters like the corona pandemic. When we open up our markets, we are able to caution ourselves against that, because the goods are in better supply. The industries are in better health because they are actually selling something that is being bought by many people. The demand is high. People are working, people are in jobs, and generally, our economies will recover. Our economies will be better, will grow in double digits. And as I head towards the end of my address to you today, I'd like to make comments in as far as what the global north, the global west, the disservice that they are doing to the people of the least developed countries, the LDCs of this continent. The tariffs that these big nations, the G7s, are conducting and carrying out against the goods that they presumably consider to be competing against the industries at their homes, are denying the children of Africa what they deserve. And therefore I'm calling out to economies, the grown-up economies, you have enough. You have enough security for your people. You have enough financial incentives to cater for emergencies. Please open up your markets. Do not be greedy. Let the children in Africa also get a share of the good things that come from you. Allow us to import to your countries. If possible, remove all the tariffs, because that way our people will be working. Your people will benefit from that too, because when that is done, the poorest of the poor in your country will also be able to afford the goods that we can import to your country. And those nations are indeed ready for that, but they don't want to. So we ask the Americas of the day, we ask the Netherlands of the day, we ask the United Kingdoms of the day to open up their markets and do away with the non-tariff barriers that are denying African traders, African manufacturers from accessing the markets in those countries. Also, towards the end, what we can do, this far we've come. It's true that some measures that we might want to conduct, some measures we might want to do cannot be done immediately. But going forward as government in the world, we can make known the kind of laws that we have placed in place to protect our markets. At the same time, we need to make less of those laws Because it's in a world whereby you can access a movie that was made by an American on your phone, it's just unfair that you can sell an American something just because you're in a country that is in a third world. As I said, we have been blessed with a lot. Call it providence. Call him God. Call him Allah. Call him whatever you might call him. Jesus has blessed us with an abundance of resources in the world. When we open up our markets, when we allow trade to flourish in between our countries, our nations, as much as I could have some varied opinions on those borders should exist in the first place, but since they are there and cannot be done away immediately, we need to appreciate the fact that when division of labor is global, then there is a better exploration, better exploitation of the natural resources that come from our ground, that come from our gifts, our talents. If there should be an audition in America, why is it that a Kenyan cannot leave and go there? Just because, why? We should open up our nations, open up our economies, and plan for that. And therefore, fellow countrymen, the price we pay for open markets is great. The price that we must pay to improve our situation is great, but it's worth it. So let's open up those markets. Because that way we'll be able to better cater for the needs of our people. So in as far as nations existing in autarky is concerned, it's true that as nations we have a different natural giftings. There's a good that a Kenyan can produce with a lower opportunity cost. There's a good that an American could produce but with a high opportunity cost. When those markets are open, those set of differences that exist can be able to be neutralized, and that way we don't have to pay extreme prices to get something that we could get from nature. Man is an exploiter. That's natural. But as man, the best way to explore the good things that come from God is by opening up our markets. And I'm not saying that industries should not be protected against those similar industries in other nations. All I'm trying to say is trade policy that is aimed at barring others from trading with you should only be used for industries that produce capital goods. Goods that create value for other industries. Those are the only ones that should be protected. Otherwise, if it's secondary goods that are not of necessity to industry, the basis of industry, then we should open up our markets for that. Because that way, when we promote the industries in other nations, when we promote industry of other people, we are better placed in having convenience. So with that said, my call out to Kenyans today, my call out to the people of Uganda, my call out to the people of Africa is let's open up our markets. And my call out to the people of Europe, do not be greedy, do not be selfish. Open up your markets. Let's have a free trade system in the world, because that way is the only way we can be able to improve the lives of the people in the least developed countries. They don't need aid now. They can help themselves. They have AIDS already. They don't need aid. There's AIDS. So we need to be generous and to be open and to be honest to ourselves that we have, maybe you as Europe have enough that you should share with others. Because there's no way a kid in Africa should have to suffer when a kid in Europe has plenty. We can share. One world, one love. Thank you.